Helping Seniors Television, all about improving quality of life for seniors. If you're a senior, know a senior, or plan to be a senior, then this show is for you. It's all about helping you develop your own aging plan so you can age actively and with dignity. Helping Seniors Television from the Helping Seniors Network of information, education, and resources.
I'm Kerry Fink. Welcome to today's edition of the Senior Resource Center of Brevard and our community information series. You know, we've been meeting here at Zon Beachside every last Monday of the month. And so we've been able to cover all these things that are so important because part of our mission as a nonprofit network is to give information that helps you come up with your own aging plan, is what our president and founder, Joe Steckler, likes to call it. We've given it a slightly more or less formal title. We call it Getting Your Ducks in a Row. But the point is you want to take advantage of the ideas and concepts that are presented so that you're ahead of the curve. Don't be caught in crisis mode. Something happens, now all of a sudden it's an emergency. Much better when we can get ahead of it. So all this year, we've been talking about several areas that are so important for your aging plan. We began the year with the topic of legal. What are legal documents that you need to have in place so that there's a plan for everything. Government has a great plan and everybody smiles at the joke. I'm here from the government. I'm here to help you. Government has a plan for you. Much better that you make sure it's the plan that you would like to have to be sure it all lines up together. The second month, we talked about finances, and there's a lot of questions about that. It's not just, do I have a retirement account? There's a lot of things like, when do you start your Social Security? How do you make sure you're getting the most bang for your buck? Then we moved on from there to talk a little bit about if you're going to choose to age in place, meaning you want to stay in your present home, what are the things that you would do to be able to make sure you can do that safely? Everything from house modifications so that it's senior friendly to just security at home if you're going to be there. The next month we moved on to, a lot of people say, listen, the kids are out of the house. I'm ready to downsize. I'm willing to look at assisted living, some other options. I don't want to have to cut grass anymore, whatever the case is. So we had some real good sessions on that. We then moved on from there to medical. And that's thinking about everything that you need to understand, both about medical things that you might run into, but even just health and wellness. And then most recently, we talked about Medicare because that's mainly going to be a big impact is you do have a doctor's appointment and hopefully that's about it. But if you have to see specialists or have other tests done, you really want to know the ins and outs and make sure that coverage is right for you. A lot of people say, well, I have my car, I'm good. And that's great. What if there comes a time when you can't drive or you decide it may not be the best thing for you to be driving? At that point, you're going to look for some options. And I can tell you, Nancy Deerdorf, who's our operations director, she takes upwards of 400 or 500 calls now a month from seniors and their families trying to sort out different things. And one of the top categories that comes up over and over is transportation. How do I get to my doctor's office? How do I get out and get groceries if you don't have a car? Is there public transportation? Can I get somebody to come get me? What are my options? And so that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. And I'm also going to reserve a minute or two toward the end to talk about another kind of transportation. That is the Helping Seniors Foundation Cruise, which is a fundraiser for helping seniors. I'm taking a little bit of license with that, but we'll go for it. So Rachel, welcome today. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. So I just want to start to ask, let's start with the basic question. I have an idea of what I think I know a case manager is. In fact, I know from like hospital visits, they say, oh, we have a case manager assigned to you so that you can go for your physical therapy or if you need rehab or something after your hospital stay. Can you kind of clear that up for those of us that don't really understand all this?
Absolutely. That's a good question because the person that is designated to you in a facility, in a hospital, a rehab facility, and then they're known as a case manager, they have a very specific job, and that's to get you from point A to point B safely. So their job is to get you from the hospital into your next system of care, whether that's a rehab facility or home with home health, or from the rehab facility home safely. But that just means having a safety plan in place and getting you to the next step. That means that their job stops right there. A private case manager, however, is somebody who's attached and assigned specifically to you And that person is looking at you in a global situation. And so they're not just looking at the safety of one transition. They're looking at your housing. They're looking at your bill pay. Are you able to get to and from those vital appointments? Are you able to get the nutrition that you need in the home? If that's not a safe situation, what that next situation looks like and how to get there.
Okay. So one of the things that I would ask as I was thinking about this, because we have a lot of friends in the Helping Seniors of Brevard organization who go in and they provide home care and things like that. And I know a lot of times I've heard as I talk with different people who are providing those services that they say a lot of times they feel like they're an extension of the family because maybe the adult children are like living out of state. Maybe everybody's from, the Midwest or something, and mom and dad have started coming down to Florida for years, and they get down and visit mom and dad when they can, but then they don't really, they're getting concerned because maybe it's getting tougher for mom and dad to do all those things, and we got to find a solution, but they don't know who to call or how to go. And I guess a lot of times, and I'm thinking about, our own personal situation where we were trying to step in and do that for our moms as they were getting older. And one of the challenges for us, even though I would like to think I'm highly intelligent, the problem is we don't really have a frame of reference. So the doctor says, well, your mom needs this or they need this kind of thing. And we really don't, we're doing the best we can to keep up with it. But I guess that's one of the things as an expert you sort of have, right?
Absolutely. I think it's that's a common question. Most people think that there's only a need if there's no one to fill those shoes. And absolutely, there are situations where a case manager can fill the role as a power of attorney or a healthcare surrogate and actually can be that extension to the family. But in many cases, someone just does not know how to find the specific community resources. There's a lot of things out there and a lot of complicated systems to have to navigate, and having an expert by your side is important. So we might have families who are estranged, have families that are at a distance, or in fact, a working daughter or son that's here in town and just does not have the time to invest in getting mom to and from a doctor's appointment, but is concerned about what the doctor has to say and wants to make sure somebody is collecting that valuable information and passing it back and forth from specialty doctor to regular doctor and to them.
I was smiling as you were telling that story because this is literally a story in our own family where, we discovered that it was probably better if one of us went to the doctor with one of the moms, because if the mom went by herself, what did the doctor say? Oh, everything's fine. And then we're trying to sort that part of it out. And I guess that's one of the real benefits is like, at least when we went in, if mom couldn't think of the question to ask, we would at least try to ask what seemed important for us. But you're right. So many people don't have the time for that. And there's another factor in this that we talked about. We've set our theme for this year to be get your ducks in a row. But through the process of going through this, we also determined our theme already for the next year, which is don't try this on your own. Because what we keep learning is, particularly like we had this when we were talking about the legal situation, you might think you're smart downloading a form on, online or something. And when you really need it to work, it becomes a nightmare because it's not going to do what you want to do. And now you're not in a place or a position where anything can be changed. So you're stuck with, again, if you don't have a plan, the government has a plan. May not necessarily be the plan that you want to have happen. But I was thinking as you were talking about this, the things that you're able to do as a case manager really make all the difference in the world because you have the experience and you also know who to call even if something presents that's new for you because you have that set of resources. So kind of with that as a background, if it's okay, let's shift into the world of transportation, because I guess that's something when we were talking about this particular thing, you said, I get a lot of calls about that.
Well, absolutely. I think the average person, they think they're, like you said earlier, good to go because they have their own vehicle or because they have a family member who's taking them now to and from the doctor. But that family member could have a crisis. They could be out of town. They could like to travel. There's a lot of different things that can get in the way of that program or that plan for them. And so as a case manager, one of the things that I like to do is build a plan A and plan B and even a plan C. I think it's important to know what you're going to do and when something falters. And so there are a lot of different resources in the community that people on an average basis might not be aware of because we're located in a healthcare system and we're out talking to people all the time. we're a little more privy to some things that are out there. We understand what resources we can pull from that people aren't always aware of. And so there are free transportation systems out there. There are a number of different ways that you can call upon a paid transportation source to go with you to an appointment that might even add some extra added layers of security for your family members. A lot of people don't consider maybe using a private duty agency when they're going to a doctor's appointment. It might be roughly the same cost to hire a caregiver or to pay for a non-medical transport to take you to and from the doctor. But if you hire a private duty care person to go with you, you actually have someone who's with you, safely makes sure that you get into the doctor's appointment, is able to make sure that that script of whatever the doctor is writing for makes it back into the proper hands, and that somebody gets home safely the entire time, is never left alone. So if you have any elements of confusion with your parents or something like that, that's an extra added layer of security, and it still has a very similar cost. If they're a little more independent, there are some free resources around town also that they can sign up for as well.
Wow. You know, one of the things I was going to mention is I feel Nancy Deerdorf, our operations director, is paying every time I hear a voicemail, because we all get voicemails that come in as people call, because Nancy is diligent about calling everybody back as soon as they call. So she goes, listen, the only reason you're going to get the answering machine is because I'm on a different assignment at that minute, but I will call you back. And so somebody will always call up and say, but I got to be at the doctor tomorrow. That's a terrible problem, because about that point, I guess you're probably down to, finding an Uber or a cab or something like that.
That's a possibility. What I would say is part of what you're talking about is getting your ducks in a row, right? Yes. So that there is an element of planning and everything. And the longer you have to get something ready, the less likely you are to be dealing with less choices. The higher the crisis, the reduced number of options you have out there. That's inevitable. But if you are assigned, like some of these free resources we'll talk about, if you sign up, I'm a big advocate for pre-enrolling with different systems. Okay. You may or may not need a caregiving agency down the road, but vet them, talk to them, see who you like the best. Are their prices reasonable, or are they able to respond to you in a good amount of time? Do they have minimum numbers of hours that you have to commit to? And then sign their contracts, put them aside. And then when you need the resource, all you have to do is call. Yeah. Then if you need something like that kind of a resource to get to and from a doctor, that's going to be a lot more likely than some of the free transportation systems. The free transport's going to probably require you to make at least a week of given time. Our friends at Aging Matters have a couple different programs out there. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Aging Matters. They do the Meals on Wheels program, but they do a lot of amazing things in the community. But they have a TransServe program that is for people that are more on the independent side, that can get to in and out of a vehicle on their own, but they only require a week to be able to set up transportation. And they'll not only take you to doctor's appointments, but they'll also take you to things like the grocery store, or if you have a family member who's even in a skilled nursing facility and you want to go visit, they'll do things like that. They have a veterans program as well that works taking veterans to and from the VA, which that's a challenge for a lot of people because of distance. Brevard County is huge. So getting to and from the VA, if you're a veteran, they have other veterans that will drive you. So not only do you get free transportation, but you get a little camaraderie along the way. So that's a great resource out there. There's also a group called Resource Center for Disability Solutions, used to be known as Center for Independent Living. And they are just that. That's exactly what they do. They are resources for people who are disabled. And so if you are able to schedule your own appointment, they'll take you to and from those doctor's appointments. They have a number of other free resources that they do, including the grab bar programs and things like that, both of those resources. But they'll get you to and from those doctor's appointments. And all you have to do is call them when you finish the doctor's appointment. They'll come back and pick you up. When we're bringing somebody into case management services with our firm, it could be different for each. So I would say specifically, if you're looking into a case manager, ask them what they do for their initiation and intake. But we start with two different assessments, one that is more of a social assessment and one that is more of a clinical assessment. So we have an RN case manager who will do a clinical assessment, which basically takes a Polaroid of what today looks like. I want to be able to, in any point in time, if I have to walk into a doctor, I want to be able to hand them something that says, this is what normal looks like for mom or for dad, so that if there's a change, if we've had a condition change or something, they can see exactly where that came from. And this is what we consider a quote baseline. We also do a social intake. And so during that, we're going to talk about everything that we could have come up in the future. And this is kind of where we learn what we really need to fill in those gaps with. So we talk about everything from what are your vital statistics in case I need to share those someday, to what's your plan for a hurricane? Do you have shutters on your home? Do you have a place that you go to when the storms are coming into town? And if you don't, then what kind of plan can I put in place for you? Which a lot of times I recommend to families that they look into, they take their first dive into assisted living by looking at what we call a respite. So that basically means a hotel room set up in assisted living that they can stay at for a short period of time. They charge a nightly rate. So what better situation to be in when there's a hurricane coming around than a building that's probably built a lot stronger than your smaller home, that has generators and some backup supplies and even nurses around the clock that are going to be there with you. And you're going to truly have a hurricane party versus having a little bit of a panic in your home. So we try that. That's one way that we kind of pick up on, okay, well, we should probably talk about what our plan looks like, a better plan for your hurricane. And so then we talk about all of those different kinds of things. If something happens to you, who am I calling? Who am I going to keep informed? Who do you want me to talk with on a regular basis? How do you get to and from your doctor's appointments? What do you want me to do for you in regards to transportation? Do you feel safe navigating your home? Do we need to look at grab bars? Do we need to put in ramps? Do we need to do any of those things? What about a pendant system? Have you ever had any falls? Do you maybe even need some strength building where I need to talk to maybe a physical therapist about coming in and getting you a little stronger in the home? So we do a little bit of just a conversation to talk about what everyday life looks like. And that pulling from that tells me exactly what I need to refer somebody for, if it's helpful.
No, absolutely. You know, and I think it's kind of interesting because as a case manager, you're the director of case management for a law office. And I think that's a little bit kind of on the cutting edge of technology because I don't know that many elder law firms that go to that route. But I think you're with the law office of Amy B. Van Fossen, and Amy herself has been a longtime friend of the Helping Seniors organization and a real strong advocate for seniors. And I'm guessing, but I kind of feel like one of the reasons she felt like developing this in the office is like, I help you get all your paperwork, so everything's airtight, buttoned up, and you're good to go with that. But now we want to be sure that the plan that you've got will keep you safe moving through things, right?
Absolutely. Actually, I believe that what started case management in the law firm was because Amy had a client specifically who came to her and he had been exploited. And unfortunately, in this case, it had been an exploitation by a professional.
Oh.
And so it put her in a scenario where she just didn't feel comfortable anymore, at the moment anyway, handing somebody off to the community and not having somebody who was her eyes and ears to what an appropriate person was in the community. So she decided she wanted to take on a component of the law firm where she could be that helper towards somebody. It's not infrequent in a law firm that you have somebody who comes in that says, I know I need a power of attorney and a healthcare surrogate, but my family members are in jail, or my family members are estranged and I really don't have anybody to serve on my behalf. And so in our case, the attorney will serve as power of attorney. Only the attorney can act on a legal and financial basis, but the healthcare surrogacy is kind of extended to our department, and there's non-clinical and RN case managers that work within our department to kind of coordinate all of the care efforts. And that way, Amy is still the decision maker, and she's making sure that you're taken care of in the best way possible, but she has kind of a team to go out there and be the hands-on to help you through everyday needs.
You know, coming back to the transportation question, one of the things I get, Joe Steckler, our president and founder, he's always talked about when you make an aging plan or you're setting something up to do, to get your ducks in a row, he talks about a thing called elements of care. And what he means by that is purchase the correct amount of service or help that you need at the stage that you're at. In other words, don't jump ahead and spend more than you need to for where you're at. So we've talked about this a lot, that he'll say one of the things that he likes to see is where somebody starts getting some companion care in the home because it gets the people familiar with that. And then particularly through COVID, I think a thing that we learned was if the adult children are out of state and we're used to coming to see mom every 3 or 4 months, you know, come down for a weekend, they felt in touch. But when COVID happened and nobody could get any place, it became even more important to have, hands and arms and eyes right here, on the ground. So, but the question I got to was, I've also, when I talk to people who are in that line of work, they say they're kind of the first point and they're walking with the senior for quite a while. And then there's a point where it makes sense. They're going to have to hand off because maybe, something is happening memory-wise, or there's other things that are going on that require a higher level of care. And that's what Joe's talking about. Then you move to the next element of care. The question I was kind of circling back around to is, do you ever get involved? This is going to be a funny question. Do you ever get involved when it's decided that it's probably not safe for mom to drive anymore?
Yeah.
Good.
Yes. It's not abnormal for someone to come talk to a case manager or talk to the attorney even when they get to a place where they're like, mom and dad are being a little stubborn. Won't we all? But that they're to a place where something needs to change. And so they're leaning on that professional to be the voice of reason for family members. And sometimes we pull other community resources and extend that even further to help us along with that. And so maybe they're working with aging services and there is a dementia diagnosis. And so we can, between the case manager, the attorney, and the doctor, we can kind of come together and have a little more realistic conversation about what's appropriate. And there are systems in place also that if you feel somebody is truly unsafe and it needs to be reported, that they will have to go through a testing kind of scenario in order to be able to maintain their license. But most of the time, a softer conversation is enough to talk about, hey, how about I help you a little bit? And because you never know that person that themselves might actually be prideful because they don't want to lean on another person. They don't want to burden their child with having to take them to the appointments. But if we can say, hey, let me help with that, then we might be able to relieve that burden and it doesn't ever have to get to a point where it's a little more forced.
Yeah, and not only that, I guess probably because of your expertise and your knowledge, then you're able to say it's not quite as frightening as you think because there's a lot of good options. We can get this worked out. You're still going to be able to get to this and that. Is that part of, like, let's just say let's just say for a second you're an adult child and you really are concerned about mom's driving. I do remember having that talk with my mother. and is there a way to make that any easier?
I would always say if you have a professional in your life, rely on them, because if nothing else, that professional is probably going to be willing to not only be the voice of reason, but maybe sometimes even play the bad guy. And so if we can remove that burden from you and allow you to just keep the relationship of mother-daughter, and not have to carry that burden on your own.
Makes all the sense in the world. What is something that you might want to share? I guess I'm just trying to think, is there a question or an area that we haven't talked about? Again, our theme for today, we're talking about, let's talk transportation. And we're talking about, obviously, if you have your car and you're good at driving, it's not a problem. But for many people, as we get older, maybe it's things like, I can drive okay in the day, but I don't trust my vision at night, or things like that. How do you help a family or a person like reconcile all those different changes moving all at the same time? And anything else that you would want to present as kind of like advice, like, hey, if you think you're running into this or you could see it coming at you down the road, maybe start to plan like this.
Care coordination is very helpful. So even if you choose to lean on a case manager or a family member, whoever that appropriate person is, to kind of help to pull all of those elements together for you, it'll keep you from having the anxiety of trying to do it yourself. So say it's your niece and your niece is coordinating doctor's appointments. If you live in an assisted living or an independent living, I say lean first to the transportation that's available through the community. Oftentimes that's limited to a specific days of the week or specific time periods, but then that's going to help you as a care coordinator to make sure that you're staying within those parameters. Every doctor's office is well aware that you're going to be burdened with some of those stipulations. So if it's Tuesday, Thursday, 9 to 2, then when you're calling to make your doctor's appointments, try to stick to those days and times that you're going to go within that. And if you have something that's rare, that's outside of that, I was thinking earlier when you were mentioning something that was last minute, oftentimes your doctor's appointment doesn't become last minute unless they're fitting you in. But oftentimes labs, things like that, they can become something that is a little less short notice. And so you can call upon any number of those free transportation systems that we were talking about. And when we were talking about wait list earlier, a lot of times they have, they're taking client A, B, and C somewhere, but they can pick you up along the way and drop you off to go and get those labs done and then pick you up later. And if you have the flexibility that they can fit you in, they're going to be more than willing to do that. So I would say do that as well. I am a big advocate for pre-enrollment, as I mentioned earlier. So with at least one home care company, and oftentimes with my clients, I will do that with two. I'll choose two home care companies because I might have one who has a difficulty staffing a specific situation, because we all know when you need something, it happens when? It happens yesterday, right? You needed it and it happened immediately and you don't have time to schedule something. And if they're facing a difficult day where they're overbooked or whether they're short on caregivers, which is a problem, and since COVID has been a kind of a rampant issue, I try to have another backup plan as well. So I would enroll with two home care companies. I would also look at both of those free transportation systems we were talking about earlier and enroll with both of them. And I know that's a lot of paperwork up front, a lot of little visits and things, but I'm telling you, it will save you when the time comes that you actually need to book something. You're going to be very grateful that you did that and not having to dish out a ton of money for Ubers to go different places.
Such good wisdom. Well, before we close up our conversation on this, let me ask you to share how people get in touch with you if they've been watching this thing and like, well, this sounds good. I want to investigate some more about the possibility of case management or getting some help in that area. Or maybe it's just that somebody says, yeah, I like what you're saying about the transportation. Can you share a couple of numbers? How do they get in touch with you?
You can reach us anytime through our main phone number at 321-345-5945, and that's the law office. And also just a little add-in, there are case managers all around town, and I'll tell you, you don't have to be on services for them to be a resource to you. If you have a simple question, just call and ask. They're more than happy to put those things together. The majority of people who work in that specific profession are there because they love being helpers. And that's just what we want to do. It's a win for us if we're able to connect you to a resource.
I'm Joe Steckler. Thank you for joining our program today. I'd like to remind you that our senior information line is available to you at 321-473-7770. There you can get help and direction that could be helpful for your specific situation or circumstances. The work of helping seniors is very important, but we can't do it alone. That is why our sponsors here in Brevard County are so important. I'd like to thank our many area sponsors, businesses, and medical providers who support the mission of helping seniors that help us carry the cost of our media efforts. If you'd like to join us either as a business partner or simply donate as an individual, we welcome your call at 321-473-7770. You are always welcome to visit our website at www.helpingseniors.brevard.org. Thanks so much for your help. It does make a difference.